As of late, the New York Rangers have definitely started to play some better hockey, which is quite nice. But, of course, there is still definitely a big question around Gabe Perreault, the New York Rangers' clear top prospect, who I think is obviously someone who definitely has a very high potential. He seems like someone who truly does potentially have the ability to one day at the NHL level become a, point per game 90, even a 100-point kind of a player one day. It's not going to happen right now, but maybe one day he can be near that kind of a level, 80, 90, 100 points, something around there definitely seems realistic for a player of this caliber. He is a very, very good offensive threat. But of course, currently, he is in the AHL with the Hartford Wolfpack, where he is currently doing a pretty great job. And there was an article that came out from NY Times and two writers, Vince Mercogliano and Peter Baugh, where they went on to talk about how there's been some kind of NHL scouts, I guess, talk about how maybe Gabe Perreault is quote-unquote kind of too smart for the AHL. So we've got some quotes here to take a look at from some anonymous NHL scouts, and also we've got some stuff from Mike Sullivan, the head coach as well, talking about Gabe Perreault and how he's done obviously a pretty great job so far this season in the AHL, but they're really just kind of talking about how good he is and the kind of player that he can possibly become. So let's take a look at this situation because I think it's an interesting one. Obviously, I think Gabe is, like I said, clearly an amazing prospect. I think he is the absolute clear number one prospect in this Rangers system currently, and I definitely think has a very high potential. But I honestly do feel like maybe keeping him down in the AHL could be what's better. But obviously, he is dominating and he is doing a really good job down there with a not great Hartford Wolfpack team. As of late, they've started to pile on a few more wins, but still, overall this season, they have not been very good. They've been losing quite a bit. As of late, they've done a little better, but this is still a guy who is, very, very young, of course, who's leading the Hartford Wolfpack team in points and has clearly just been their best player so far. But let's get into it here with the quotes from the NY Times article, and we'll start off with one of the quotes from an anonymous scout, and they go on to say, "You can tell in the American League, sometimes he's too smart for those guys," the scout said. "He's a cerebral player, and his stick is one of the best sticks I've seen." And I think it's an interesting spot right now for Gabe because obviously he is, a top player down there in the AHL. He's the clear number one guy on the Wolfpack team that isn't very good, and he's clearly just, kind of dominating down there at moments. But I do kind of feel like, having him down there in the AHL where he is going to consistently get the top power play time. He's going to be the top threat on that power play. He's going to get a lot of ice time just in general at 5v5, at, 4-on-4, whatever it is. He's going to get a lot more opportunities than if he were at the NHL level where maybe he's not on power play 1 and he's not, getting as many minutes, of course, at 5-on-5 or at 4-on-4 or in overtime, whatever it is, right? So I think that's where there are obviously some positives and negatives to both having him in the AHL or NHL, but I really do feel like considering he isn't a, big, strong, tough player, he is a bit undersized compared to the average guy. He isn't the biggest player in the world. I do feel like, having him down there in the AHL where he can be that kind of Panarin type player where he's not going to be obviously doing a whole lot physically or defensively, but he's going to be able to just do everything possible offensively. He's going to create goals. He's going to score goals. He's going to just create so much offense, and being down there, he can be that top weapon for them and really just have the opportunity and kind of feel of being, able to just have the puck all the time on his stick if he wants it and just be able to do whatever he wants out there and try things out, where at the NHL level, obviously, he's not going to be able to do all those same kind of things. So for his development, maybe it is honestly better to have him in the AHL going forward for at least another long kind of while, maybe. At some point throughout the rest of this season, I wouldn't be shocked if he got called up again, but ultimately, I do feel like having him in the AHL is not a bad thing by any means. Letting him dominate down there is not going to be a bad thing for his development. Obviously, at some point, he's got to come up and do it at the NHL level, but for right now, this team's starting to play a little better hockey at the NHL level, and I don't think throwing in Gabe Perreault up there and saying, "Hey, kid, go up there and create a bunch of offense to save this team because they've been one of the worst offensive teams in the league." I don't think that's an option. So keeping him down there in the AHL definitely, I think, is a more than fine move, of course. And we've got another part of the article to take a look at where they go on to say, The 20-year-old earned a 3-game look with the NHL club in mid-November, but it quickly became apparent that the Rangers feel keeping him around will require more physical maturity. As coach Mike Sullivan put it, he's right, the scout said, concurring with Sullivan's assessment. I think the kid would admit it too. I think he just needs to use his time down there to get stronger, to get heavier, not just stronger in the gym, but stronger on pucks, which usually comes hand in hand. So obviously, that's kind of what I was talking about where, right now, he's obviously not at a level physically where he's, truly, 100% kind of NHL ready, I guess. So having him down there in the AHL where he can keep working out, getting stronger, but keep working on his game as well and continue to get in the top line minutes there. Because like I kind of said, I talked about this a minute ago, I'm not going to harp on it too much, but there is a real difference about, what the coach would allow a guy like Gabe Perreault, I'm sure, to do at the NHL level compared to the AHL, where down there in the AHL, he's going to be able to try so many other things out there, so many dangles, passes, moves that he might not be able to really do under a head coach like Mike Sullivan at the NHL level. So that's also a big reason to have him down there, not just to get stronger, but he can try a lot more things out there against, weaker players, of course, still great pro players who are, full-grown men who are much bigger than him for the most part, who have been playing pro hockey a lot longer, of course, but it's not the same level, of course. There is a pretty decent drop-off, so getting to try your stuff out down there, all your nice tricks, is probably a pretty good thing because at the NHL level, you might not be able to kind of have as much success right away with some of the moves that he obviously has, and he is a very, very skilled player, so I'm sure he's got quite a few, tricks up his sleeve. So having him down there in the AHL where he gets a lot more opportunities and a lot more kind of, leash, I guess you could say, to try things out, definitely makes a lot of sense. And next, we've got another piece of the article to take a look at where they go on to say, the scout noted that Perreault isn't a burner. Quote, if you say he's fast, you're lying, he said, but he can make up for that because of how quickly he thinks the game. It comes with reps, he added. I think he's in the right place in the AHL, and I think he's developing nicely, and I think he's going to be more than fine, the scout said. Quote, teams can ruin prospects if you put them in the wrong place and they're not ready. So I think they're doing it right, as frustrating as it can be. And that's kind of what I've been saying as well, of course. Obviously, him up in the NHL, yeah, that's great and all, and if he can produce, awesome. This team could definitely use some more offense and, scoring creation and just kind of scoring in general at the NHL level for sure. But I also do understand that, this Rangers team has absolutely messed up a lot of prospects over especially the last, 4, 5, 6 seasons. So I think keeping him down in the AHL, letting him do his thing down there, let him get stronger, let him get better, let him work on his game, and just play hockey down there, I think, is probably what's best. He'll obviously have a lot more pressure off him as well, being down in the AHL. Just let him get some more pro games under his belt there. Let him get more physically and mentally ready as well, because that's also a step there, getting more kind of mentally mature or just kind of stronger at moments, I'm sure will be a good thing, because he's obviously going to be one day playing at MSG in New York. It's a big, big market, so you got to be mentally strong there as well. So having him spend some more time down there in Hartford with the Wolfpack in the AHL definitely seems like a pretty smart move, and ultimately, we probably will see him at some point back up with the team, but I really do feel like him down there in the AHL is probably what's best, unless we do see some, real big injuries happen. Maybe then you call him up to kind of see what he can do, but ultimately right now, he's doing great down there. Keep him down there and let him continue to marinate, and hopefully he can one day become that kind of Panarin level talent where he can truly be an 80, 90, maybe even 100 point per season player. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching today's video. If you have enjoyed, definitely don't forget to click that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content, as I do post a video about the New York Rangers every single day at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And also, definitely don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts on Gabe Perreault? Do you want to see him in the NHL? Would you rather see him stay down there in the AHL? Do you think he's had a good season so far, a bad one? Let me know your thoughts on Gabe Perreault and his development so far. I'll catch you next one, and bye.